Now, what is this GDP output gap and why is it so important? In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, praise and blessings of Almighty God be on the seal of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his companions, and all those that follow his footsteps from now until the day of recompense. My name is Dr. Abubakar. Allah's willing, today we're going to continue with our course of understanding government, economy, policy making. Previously, we've discussed what potential GDP is. In today's lesson, we're going to look at the GDP output gap. The GDP output gap is the difference between how much we are growing and how much we should grow as an economy to be in that ideal place where our economy is not going to be overheated. What do I mean by overheated? I mean that a situation whereby you are not faced with unemployment problem or you are not faced with an inflation problem. In the previous lesson, if you could recall, while discussing potential GDP, we have explained that if you're not at your potential growth, it means you are either faced with inflation problem or faced with an unemployment problem. And this is what brought us to this output gap and why this output gap is super important in trying to know the condition of our own economy, or for you to be able to know the condition of your own economy. We've stated it that the output gap is the difference between how much you're growing at the moment and how much you should grow to be in that ideal place where you are not faced with inflation problem or unemployment problem. In today's lesson, let us just not waste much of your time. Let me just take you straight to some of these screenshots and highlight some of these output gaps, and so that you have a better understanding of what we are talking about when we talk about the GDP output gap and why it is super important. Now, look at this output gap of the total economy back in 1990s. You can see back in 1990s or before 1990s, in the United States, they're experiencing what is called a negative output gap. Now, when you're faced with a negative output gap, it means you're faced with a little bit kind of unemployment problem. So this is an unemployment problem when you see a negative output gap. Throughout the 1990s, almost off to down to 1998, up to 1998, all right, up to the end of 1997, I think, 1997 to 1998, we start seeing a positive output gap. End of 1997, meets in July. United States start experiencing a positive output gap going up to 2000, like positive output gap up to the year 2000. So it's here in the year 2000, it's highly a positive output gap. Ever since then, it's been a positive output gap. Before it started coming down in 2007, let's say 2007, 2008, 2009, 2008, 2009 financial crisis, where we've seen lots of negative output gap of the United States of America. Now, this zero, that's the balance. That's where the economy is stable. When the economy is at this zero that you can see here, it means the economy is stable. It means there is no positive or negative output gap. That means you're growing at your own potential where the economy is not overheating. When we say the economy is not overheating, we mean that there's not too much inflation. And when we say the economy is not like growing very slowly, that means we are not faced with an unemployment problem. Let me take you to other countries and let's see how other countries have been doing, using the OECD, all right, data. In the OECD data, you find most of this data. You just go to statistics and you try to get most of this data. Only developed countries are present in the OECD. So if your country is not present, especially our country, Nigeria, is not present here, so we can just make use of this data for the sake of what's called demonstration and example, and putting you through how to make use of this data. Now, let me take you back to another one. 4 economies. We have Finland, we have Japan, we have United States represented here in red, and you have Portugal. So this economy is also, this is their output gap. For example, we hardly see a year, for example, that the output gap is just -1 or just like 1. Only just few years for Japan. You can see Japan here in before 1998, they have a slightly like 0.09 negative positive output gap. And then when you come down here to 1998, Japan was having like negative output gap by just 0.1, and then negative output gap like 0.2 here, and down here, negative output gap with just 0.1. They're just close to normalizing the economy. It means the unemployment level in this economy is not too big, and it's not a big problem for Japan as at that time. But you can see 2001, they continue to face a lot of issues in 2001 with a very huge, a kind of almost 2 negative output gap, over 2 negative output gap, over 2 negative output gap, and then like that. And now, between 2007 up to 2010, based on the data available, you can see positive output gap for Japan. The same thing with Finland. When you look at Finland, Finland has a very big positive output gap in the early 90s, in the 1990s. When you look at them, Finland started getting like negative output gap with lots of unemployment problem. That's as a result of leaving the Soviet Union as at that time, and they're trying to stabilize as an economy. This is what really happened to Finland during those years. And then you can see Finland with a positive output gap that's facing inflation problem, and later on, like up to now, Finland is like moving at a positive, maybe, or negative output gap when we look at it down here. So this is how to look at the gaps of the economy. In conclusion, whenever we talk about the GDP output gap, then we're talking about that deviation between the actual GDP growth and then the percentage growth of potential GDP, or the percentage of potential GDP. And that's when you see whether an economy is overheating or an economy is growing very, very slowly. And if that economy is overheating, it means that economy is facing a lot of inflation problem. And if that economy is going slowly with facing negative output gap, it means that economy is faced with an unemployment problem. And this brings us to the end of today's lesson. Allah's willing, we're going to continue in coming lessons where we're going to continue to touch lots of other important tips with regards to economic policy making. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Thank you so much for watching.